We're back at it again with your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. This is the Money Stop. He is Cole Cusumano. I'm back. I'm Steven Cusumano. Big thanks to Cody for filling in last week, as this is the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day, presented by Kicking the Tires. And, no surprises here, Cole. Kyle Larson wins at Sonoma. Again, you guys took away the analysis of this race and absolutely killed it. 8 of the drivers you mentioned finish in the top 10, which was just, I don't want to say unheard of because it's happened before this year. But you had all 6 of the top 6. It was an impressive display of a who's who of a road course masterclass from Kyle Larson, followed by McDowell, Buescher, Elliott, Chastain, Allmendinger. You also had Reddick and Gilliland in the top 10. So hats off to you and Cody, because that was, I hope people were telling that episode last week, because you guys killed it. And as is the case always, road courses tend to be one of our strong suits here on the Money Stop.
Yeah, I was thrilled with how that analysis came out from last week, just because there were so many unknowns going into Sonoma with this repave, and even once the race actually happened, there was so much parity, so much chaos, especially in the first 2 stages. So between all the madness, the varying pit strategies, to see this much success in the form of 8 drivers in the top 10, all the top 6 highlighted as well last week. Incredible run for us, and just go to show you that we're kicking things up a notch here once again, the Money Stop. And I think we have another really good show here for Iowa. Again, lots of unknowns for this one, but I think just going off what we've seen from this year as a whole in 2024 on the short tracks, and just, I guess, taking some stuff with a grain of salt, you can also go back and look at some previous starts in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series at Iowa. But just again, speaking on Sonoma, I thought it was one of the more entertaining races that we've seen at Sonoma in the last probably 10 years, I want to say. And I also feel like it was easily one of the best road course races in the next-gen car in the last going on 3 seasons now. So hats off to Sonoma and SMI with that repave. I thought it was a really good deal. And I'm excited to see where this track goes in the future because, you mentioned it a couple times last show. Second longest tenured road course on the circuit. It's been there for a long time, has such a great history, great atmosphere, great racing vibes, and I'm really, really happy to see it come back to in a big way last week.
It was awesome. Definitely a step in the right direction for Sonoma and for road course racing as a whole, and we can only hope for the same in terms of short track racing, as, like you said, we head to Iowa this week. Starting lineup to be determined Saturday at 1:05 p.m. Eastern Time. And Cole, as we take it to the bank, preview the upcoming race, go into our analysis for bets and daily fantasy. Let's look at the pre-qualifying odds per DraftKings. Like you said, there's not a lot to go off of, but there is at least some to go off of. And Vegas has pretty heavy favorites for this race that start with Christopher Bell at plus 450. And then tightly in pursuit, Kyle Larson plus 500. Not far behind him, you've got Denny Hamlin at plus 700. And then co-favorites at the 4th highest odds, you've got Martin Truex Jr. and William Byron at plus 1,000. So definitely some things to go off of, Cole, but as we look at the Iowa Corn 350 for this week, why don't you kick off our favorites category?
Awesome. I'm going to kick things off here with our odds-on favorite in Christopher Bell, who is valued again at plus 450 for the race win and $10,800 for DFS. Those are the second most expensive values in that regard for DFS and DraftKings. And Christopher Bell, riding a 3-race top 10 streak through a lot of adversity, I want to say here. So this streak began with the win in the 600, which was obviously rain-shortened. Then he had that race at Gateway where he had his engine expire in the last 30 laps or so, 20 laps. And then last week at Sonoma, where there was a lot of parity and certainty, he had an average running position of 17th in this race. I don't think he scored any stage points at all. So to rally and finish top 10 was really impressive. I wasn't crazy surprised by it, just given Bell's success on road courses in the past. He has the 2 wins there previously in the Cup Series. So again, I just think that having that streak of top 10s is really important at this point in the season because we mentioned it numerous times throughout the year. And honestly, throughout his Cup career, Christopher Bell's somebody who has the speed. He runs up front. He has those races where he's dominant, but he also has a bulk of the season, mainly the regular season, where he doesn't score those top 10s. He has the speed, but he can't close it out. So to see him getting these top 10s, getting the wins, the quality finishes this early in the season is really important to me. And I think it really speaks to that team and how far they've come and how much of a contender they're going to be the rest of the way. Just speaking on this stretch, 4 races going on now. He's up to 9th in the standing, which is +6 from where he was 4 weeks ago. So really impressive run by that team. And just outside of the general overview of his 2024 season, he's been really good in the short tracks. He has the 1 win at Phoenix, 3 top 10s and 5 starts, almost 100 laps led. But the most important thing for me with Christopher Bell going into this weekend is that he did the tire test at Iowa in June a few weeks ago. And he is a 2-time Iowa winner. He has 8 starts there with only 1 finish outside the top 10. And he is the all-time laps leader there between both series, Trucks and Xfinity, with nearly 800 laps led. So I know they repaved Iowa, but it wasn't a complete repave. So they repaved from the middle down in a few of the turns. So Christopher Bell was not very, bullish when talking about the repave and the tire test. He said it's going to be a 1-lane track. He doesn't think there's going to be a whole lot of passing. So I think having that extra track time is going to be very pivotal from that tire test. And then just having the extra 8 starts in addition to 2 wins is going to be huge as well going into this track, even with the repave. So I'm looking at Christopher Bell as somebody who knows how to get around Iowa, someone who is a great short track racer, and someone who's shown a lot of speed this season and finally has been putting it all together. So he's the odds-on favorite and one of my favorites, obviously. But I also wanted to hit on last week's winner and now a 3-time winner in 2024, Kyle Larson, who is, again, the second best odds to win at +500 and the most expensive driver for DFS at $11,000. He is now, again, a 3-time winner this season, tying him for most in the series with William Byron and Denny Hamlin. He's also tied for most top 5s and poles this season with 7 and 5 respectively, 7 and 3 respectively. And he also has the most laps led and the second best average finish. So he superseded Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. in that category for best average finish. And also worth noting, he's back to the points lead following that win. So Kyle Larson, Summer of Larson, whatever you want to call it, is back on. He also did the tire test at Iowa, which I'm taking a lot of stock into, just seeing as, again, any track time you can get at a newer track. Someone we're going for the first time on the Cup circuit, and just with the repave in general, it's going to be very crucial. So having Kyle Larson with that experience might not be the best thing for the rest of the field. Same thing with Christopher Bell, because both are at the top of their game right now. But I think these are the 2 guys that I'm looking at as the definitive favorites of this race. Kyle Larson also has 2 prior starts at Iowa, so not as much as Christopher Bell or a few of these guys who've made prior starts at Iowa. But he's also been very dominant on the short tracks this season. 4 top 5s, 2 runner-ups, a lowest finish of 14th, almost 300 laps led, and a 5.2 average finish. So just flat-out dominant. I think there's one driver who's been the best of the best on the short track, so you'll get to here in a second. But I think Kyle Larson's definitely been one of the best, as well as Christopher Bell. And just speaking on the tire test and where these drivers are at and the teams are at this point in the season, they are my 2 personal favorites for this weekend at Iowa.
I could not agree more. I mean, you think about a tire test where we haven't been to this track before. I'm taking a lot of stock into that too. And not just the fact that Seabell and Larson did the tire test, it's who they are. The fact that they did the tire test, you know that Cliff Daniels is going to be taking a lot from that, and I fully expect those 2 to be the front runners. And I really think there's a sizable drop-off after that to our next 2 favorites. But you did tease the fact that I've got Denny Hamlin. I've got my sights set on Denny, who's +700 for the win. 3rd highest odds, despite having no experience whatsoever at Iowa in the Xfinity Series or the Cup Series. But why is he the 3rd highest in odds? Well, he's a 3-time short track winner this year with a lowest finish of 11th, both outlier starts. He has a 5th place average finish at the short tracks this year with 450 laps led. He has led laps in all 5 of the short track races this season. So I think that if you're looking for a guy that was not at the tire test, that has a really good chance to contend in this race, at really any race, but especially at a short track, I'm looking at Denny Hamlin. And, as I go with Denny Hamlin, he's coming off his most disappointing race of the season. When Kyle Larson took over the points lead, Denny Hamlin goes from 1st to 3rd after finishing dead last week. And no one more excited to get out of Sonoma than Denny. But I'm going to choose another driver, Cole, that had a tough race last week and kind of double down on 2 bounce-back efforts with Denny Hamlin as well as William Byron, who's a guy that's got 3 starts at Iowa, and he's won at this track twice in his career, has never finished lower than 9th among his 3 starts here. So coming off a disappointing day, 30th, second straight finish outside the top 10. He did win at Martinsville earlier this year, so we know Byron can get it done at a short track, and we know that he can get it done at Iowa from when he's raced there. He's looked really good. Plus 1,000 for the win. I think he's the best value among this favorites category. I think you've got two slam dunks in Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson, and then you've got two guys that are less of a sure bet with Byron and Hamlin, but I would not be surprised at all if one of those two guys comes out and wins the race. So I feel pretty good about that favorites category, considering how much unknown there is this week.
I do as well. I love Denny especially. But I did want to say one thing before moving on here. So we put these episodes out a few days prior to practice and qualifying so you can maximize the odds before they adjust during practice and qualifying. However, this is a weekend where I think you got to live and die by practice and qualifying. Just going into this track completely unknown, first time in the Cup Series, with the repave. And I think in regard to qualifying in DFS, you heard it with Christopher Bell and the other guys who took part in the tire test, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr. Track position is going to be pivotal in this race, considering it's going to be pretty much a one-lane track. So live and die by that. And I think in regard to like betting before practice and qualifying, the two guys I'm looking at, just with the repave tire test and all that, is Bell and Larson. But I mean, that doesn't mean that other guys don't have a shot, or you shouldn't look at them for a bet for race winner as well before the on-track action. I mean, I struggle to leave Truex off this list. He's in kind of like the same situation as William Byron minus the wins. He's got 4 straight finishes outside the top 10. Byron's got 2. They're both kind of like in this little slump right now, and I think they both can really pick things up and get back on track here. But you're really going to know who's going to be a player in this race as a legitimate race winner and a contender in general once we see the lap averages from practice and whatnot. So taking a lot of stock into that. And I also wanted to say, Denny Hamlin is the only driver on this episode that has not turned laps at Iowa. In the field in total, there have been 28 that have ran at Iowa once before in the Truck Series or Xfinity Series, and there have been 11 different winners in the field this week. The only ones that we are not going to mention on this show as far as winners are John Hunter Nemechek, Ryan Preece, Chris Buescher, and Chase Briscoe. So looking at 3 value picks and 1 potential sleeper, if you didn't agree with the drivers we're about to mention coming up for this episode as potential DFS or prop bets. So with that said, I want to move on to sleepers, who I feel really good about this week. Beginning with Ross Chastain, who I had a great hunch about last week at Sonoma, and he walked away with his first top 5 in about 5 weeks. So great pick there. I think Ross Chastain's heating up. He's riding a 4-race top 15 streak, and he's been a top 15 car on short tracks in 2024. Top 15 in all 5 starts, 1 top 10 at Phoenix, and a 12.4 average, so very, very steady. But what I'm taking stock into is that Ross Chastain has the most starts and the most laps turned at Iowa prior to this, repave and whatnot. 14 starts. That's 5 more than the next most from any driver. In the Truck Series, he has 1 runner-up, second most laps led all time with over 250. I think Ross Chastain's going to be a slam dunk for Iowa. And looking at his odds at plus 2,500 for the race win and $8,300 for DFS, that is a lock for DFS all day, like he was last week. The first thing I'm doing for DFS this week for Iowa is I'm going down to Ross Chastain, putting him in there, and then building from there. But his race winner odds for plus 2,500 are really, really good. Same can be said for Brad Keselowski, who I just mentioned ran the tire test here a few weeks ago. And he had a 3-race podium finish streak snapped last week at Sonoma. However, I kind of expected this, seeing as he has not been great on road courses in the next-gen car, and really in general, since the late 2010s. So to see him walk away with a 13th-place finish, I thought was really impressive, really encouraging, and it just speaks to how good this team is. You look at him collectively, 7 top 5s are tied for the most in the series. He has 3 runner-ups, 6 podium finishes. This team is definitely a contender through and through, and I think that they're going to be probably one of the favorites for this win at Iowa. Looking at the short tracks, he's finished 8th or better in 3 starts this year with the best finish of 3rd. And the reason why I say he should be favored in Iowa is because he is tied for the most all-time wins there with 3. And he's finished top 10 in all 7 starts with 6 top 5s and a third-place average over that 7-race stretch with over 300 laps led. So Brad Keselowski, factoring in the tire test, how good they've been all season as probably the best Ford team, as well as their short track success and the Iowa success in the past, I think it's a no-brainer that Brad Keselowski should be a lock for DFS at $9,200, so only $900 more expensive than Ross Chastain. And he's also worth looking at for race winner bets at plus 1,200. And one thing I also want to say before I let you take it away on your sleepers is that I mentioned maybe not placing bets for this week for race winner until practice and qualifying comes out. That's more so for the race winners, the favorites like Bell and Larson and Byron and Hamlin, because one thing I failed to mention was that going into Sonoma for the Xfinity Series, SVG's odds to win were plus 100, which, first off, I've never seen odds that short to win a race outside of maybe Kyle Busch in the Truck Series. But the point is, I don't see the odds shifting that low for Bell or Larson, even if they are that good in practice and qualifying. So I think you can wait to bet on your race winners until practice and qualifying. But if you wanted to maybe throw some money on a sleeper like a Chastain or Keselowski or the 2 drivers you're about to mention for a winner before they adjust, that's a good approach. But who are you looking at this weekend, Stephen, for sleepers?
Yeah, I want to start by saying that you're 100% right. There's definitely value to be had this week. I mean, I'm going to take a lot of stock into practice and qualifying. I'm not going to lock in anything before that unless I see it as a value. And I think that, you look at a guy in Ross Chastain that started 14 races at Iowa, plus 2,500 for the win right now. I'm going to go out on a limb and say by the time practice and qualifying ends, those odds are going to move drastically. So you look up and down the odds makers, and there's going to be a few values such as Ross Chastain and Brad Keselowski that I want to lock in, as soon as possible before those odds tend to shift. But as I look at a couple sleepers here, Cole, I'm looking at a couple of former champions of the sport, including the defending champion Ryan Blaney, who last week scored his first top 10 since Dover at the end of April. He's sitting 12th in the standings now. Ford is definitely on the upswing. He's got 2 top 10s at the short tracks this year, including a best finish of 5th. So it's been, I guess, an inconsistent season for Blaney, but his best runs, for the most part, have come at some of the short tracks this year. At Iowa, he's got 9 starts in the Xfinity and Cup Series. 2 of those have been wins for him. He's only had 1 finish outside the top 10 with over 400 laps led here, so you can kind of see where we're going with this. We're taking a lot of stock into the guys that have run a lot of laps here, and Blaney's got 9 starts between trucks and Xfinity. So between him, Chastain, I'm definitely zeroing in on those 2 guys, as well as Kyle Busch. Cole, he got Chastained out of the top 10. He's now hasn't had a top 10 in the last 4 races, so you could say that he's due. And over those 4 races, he's had top 10 speed. He's another one that needs a good run. He's 15th in the standings right now. Only top 10 of the season came at Dover, which was a short track, finished 4th. Only top 10 at a short track, I should say. 3 finishes lower than 20th outside of that. So there's a little bit of volatility baked in with Kyle Busch. I'd like to see how he fares during practice and qualifying. He does have a win in a pair of starts, though, at Iowa. So I really like the idea of this sleepers category serving as the place where there is some value pre-qualifying. I think that more so this week than certain others, we're going to see those odds move quite a bit. So if you're able to maximize the value by placing a bet on one of these guys prior to the odds shifting, that's where I think a lot of the money is to be made this week. I don't think the value this week is in the slam dunks. I don't think that it's in our favorites. I think that if you can max out value on guys that precede a really good qualifying run or really good practice runs, that's where there is money to be made this week. And I really like that idea of looking at Chastain, Keselowski, Blaney, and Busch, that is, as the sleepers this week, Cole.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Kyle Busch is in need of a really good run after being bullied out of yet another top 10. And I think that was a good segue into my first value pick for this week. His buddy, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., valued at $6,000 for DFS. And it's been a tough season for Stenhouse. It's more like the Stenhouse of old in the Cup Series. Only got 2 top 10s, sub 23rd place average finish. So going back to the Stenhouse of old, maybe not a great thing for the Cup Series, but a good thing in general going back to Iowa, because once upon a time, Stenhouse was very dominant in the Xfinity Series and Nationwide Series. He's a champion in that aspect. And looking at Iowa, he is also tied for the most wins all time at that track with 3, with Brad Keselowski and one other driver we'll mention here on your end of things for the value picks category. But the only difference is he scored back-to-back-to-back wins at Iowa. So 3 straight wins at that track. And he has a 7.3 average in 6 starts. So I know things haven't been great for Stenhouse this season, compared to last year especially. But in case you couldn't tell, I'm taking a lot of stock into the previous experience on Iowa, whether it be trucks or Xfinity. And I think you can take stock in having those wins and having those starts in the seat time, because no matter what, repave or not, that's going to be a big deal. And I think just having that success, it should mean good things for Stenhouse, as well as someone who's in a very similar boat to him, Austin Dillon, who is only $200 more expensive at $6,200 for DFS. Much like Stenhouse, very similar careers and 2024 in general. So, I mean, he's another guy. He tore it up in the Truck Series as a former champion, tore it up in the Xfinity Series, and then kind of fizzled out when he got to the Cup level. Both have won a few Crown Jewel races, so it's eerily similar, like, stat line. And even in regard to this season, also only has 2 top 10s, sub 20th place average. But again, if we are talking about the Austin Dillon of old, he has seen success and experience at Iowa. He has 9 starts, which is the second most compared to Ross Chastain's 14, which is a tie with Bubba Wallace, actually, for second most at 9 starts. He also has 1 win there, 2 runner-ups, and the second most laps led all time with nearly 600. So 2 drivers who have not been good this year, to put it bluntly, but they have seen a lot of success in the Truck Series and Xfinity Series at Iowa, and I'm taking a lot of stock into that with the experience and whatnot.
Yeah, that's big-time value. You're talking about a couple guys that are in the 6,000s for DFS. I mean, especially for a guy like Stenhouse that has been that good at Iowa in his past with the 3 wins, that's some really good value. I'm going to go with one that's in a similar vein here, Cole, another one in the 6,000-ish price range. That's Eric Jones, who's valued at 6,400, and he's had an abysmal last 6 races. He's failed to place above 19th over his last 6 starts. He's had 4 finishes of exactly 19th in that span, but I think if you're looking for a bounce-back race for Eric Jones, it starts with Iowa, because he has 8 starts at this track, and he's the 3rd driver that's tied in 3 wins with Brad Keselowski and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. So you're looking at 2 guys in Stenhouse and Eric Jones that both have 3 wins at this track, regardless of what they came in. Not only that, for Eric Jones, I mentioned his 8 starts, he's had top 10 in all but one of those with nearly 400 laps led. So I'm looking at a lot of really good value in this sector of the show between Eric Jones, Ricky Stenhouse. And again, you got to reach deep here. We're not looking for, I'm not going to come out here and say that somebody like Ty Gibbs or Martin Truex Jr. is a good value. We're looking for a deeper dive that's going to actually win you some money this week. And that's where I see this coming here. The 4th driver in our value picks is the most expensive of this bunch with good reason. And that is the runner-up from the last race at Sonoma, Michael McDowell, who is at 7,200 in daily fantasy. It may not be in the 6,000s, but it's still a really good value this week. Said that he needs to win to make the playoffs, and he's right, because he's 20th in the standings right now. It would take a miracle for him to end up making the playoffs on points. He does have top 10s in 3 of his last 5 starts, but it's still a massive uphill battle for Michael McDowell, who's got 8 starts at Iowa. That includes 2 top 5s and a runner-up in his most recent start at Iowa. So riding the momentum of, again, top 10s in 3 of his last 5 starts, 2nd place last week, a track that he is more familiar with than a lot of the other guys in the field. I think that Michael McDowell is a guy that I definitely have my eye on. And honestly, Cole, between these 4 drivers, Stenhouse, Dillon, McDowell, and Jones, I wouldn't be surprised if 2 of them place in the top 10. So I'm looking at some potential prop bets where you could look at them to finish in the top 5, top 10, and would not be surprised if there's money to be made with our big money bets this week too. That's a field of 12 drivers, though, Cole. Let's get this down to 1 from each category per person. So I'll start this off. I'm going to take Denny Hamlin as my guy from the favorites category. Just love what he's done on the short tracks this year. I will take Ryan Blaney from the sleepers category, and I will take Eric Jones from the value picks this week.
Sweet. So I'm going to go with actually 1 driver from each manufacturer. For my favorite, I go with the Toyota of Christopher Bell. For my sleeper, going to go with the Ford of Brad Keselowski, and for my value pick, we're going to go with the Chevy of Austin Dillon.
Well, let's talk big money bets, Cole, because I mentioned before, like, we were talking about the fact that odds are going to move once practice and qualifying take place. There's definitely value to be had prior to that, and I think that this is a pretty good week for big money bets because you talk about prop bets this week. Vegas is undermining a lot of guys this week, and you look at the values of some of our favorite picks this week, like Brad Keselowski at plus 155 to be in the top 5. Talk about some of our value picks in the top 10, like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. plus 900 for a top 10, Eric Jones plus 600, Michael McDowell plus 285. This is not a week where there's slim pickings. I think there certainly is an amount of risk baked into all of these, considering that we haven't run a cup race here with a lot of these guys who have only been here in the Xfinity and Truck Series. But as there is some risk, there's also definitely some reward to be made for big money bets this week.
Without a doubt. I think the big one I'm looking at is the one that you first mentioned in Brad Keselowski top 5 plus 155. Outside of that, one that I feel good about that we didn't even highlight him actually, but Martin Truex Jr. to finish top 5 at plus 130. He's finished top 5 in 3 of the short track races this season with 4 top 10s. Again, I mentioned that 4-race streak of finishes lower than 10th. So I guess there's a little bit of cause for concern there, but I think just speaking on his short track success, that's another one I feel pretty good about. I guess the 2 that I'm looking at as locks on my end are Keselowski to finish top 5 plus 155 and Ross Chastain to finish top 5 at plus 280, which is a really, really good one. That's one where I feel good about Keselowski off the jump, but Ross Chastain, I think it's worth looking at before the on-track action, but you'll have a better idea of it once practice and qualifying pans out. But then, of course, those odds are going to shift, probably not in your favor. So that's one that I'd look at now as one that's maybe not as automatic as Brad Keselowski to finish top 5, but one that I'm looking at as a really good value.
Totally agree. I think that there's an amount of risk baked into placing some of these before practice and qualifying, but there is some value there. And I think that you look at some of our guys that we look at as locks, like Chastain and Brad K, at, above even money to finish in the top 5. And that's certainly something I'm considering at least this week. So keep an eye on that as we look at qualifying. But let's look at also our match bets this week, Cole, because we talk about where there's value to be made. And there's 5 different head-to-head matchups this week. I'm just going to roll through them and just breeze by whatever you think makes sense this week, because these are parlayable too. So you can definitely pair these with another sport, another different prop bet. But here's the 5 head-to-head matchups. This is on DraftKings this week that we'll go through. You got Kyle Larson versus Denny Hamlin. You got Byron versus Truex, Blaney versus Logano, Chase Elliott versus Christopher Bell, and then Alex Bowman versus Chase Briscoe.
Yep. Not a fan of any of these. So Larson versus Hamlin, you're splitting hairs. 2 guys who have been the best in the series, and they've been the best in the short tracks by far. Not touching it. Byron versus Truex, I literally compared those drivers at the end of the favorites category. Not touching that. Blaney and Logano, too much volatility there between both drivers. I think I'd give Blaney the upper hand with the 2 wins previously at Iowa, but there's not enough there for me to want to throw some money on that. Elliott versus Bell. I do like Bell better than Elliott, given his experience, the wins, the success over the past few races here in the Cup Series and the tire test. But again, it can go either way. I think they've both been pretty similar drivers in 2024, but I would give the upper hand to Bell. And then Bowman versus Briscoe. They both have starts at Iowa. Briscoe is one of those drivers I mentioned that has a win here in the past, so I'd probably give the edge to Briscoe if we're talking stats. But if you're talking equipment and just overall speed, like Bowman isn't Hendrick equipment. He's been running top 10, top 15 the last month and a half, it feels like. So, that's, again, kind of like a 50-50. The only one I liked, again, was Bell over Elliott, and that's minus 190, so I wouldn't even call that a big money bet. So, personally, I don't really look at these as profitable this weekend. I would look more so towards the big money bets as far as prop finishers, DFS, and race winner.
I'm with you. I just think that there's too many unknowns this week. And, it's good to do these on weeks where it makes sense, but this is not one of those weeks, in my opinion. So let's discuss a DFS lineup here, Cole. I think that, again, I want to reiterate the fact that it's tough when you haven't seen qualifying yet because you want to maximize the place differential points. But at the same time, this is a podcast. We're here to win you money, and we've got to give you our analysis before qualifying takes place. So here's what we came up with pre-qualifying, but definitely want to keep an eye on starting positions to maximize points. But we talked about the fact that there's really good value this week prior to those odds moving. But the thing is, they're not going to move for the DFS prices. So I think that you hit it right on the head, Cole, in saying that probably the best value period this week is Ross Chastain with all of the laps he's logged at this track. So I opened up the app, hit his name at 8,300. And then from there, it was basically all of our value picks and our favorites. So I think that we talked about Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson being the two slam dunks this week. I went with the two of them next. You got to go with your two aces in the hole. And I think, you're getting potentially another ace in Ross Chastain at the value of a sleeper, basically. But then once you choose those three, you've got to compensate with three guys that are of lesser value. And I've got three guys from our value category. Eric Jones at 6,400. You've got Michael McDowell at 7,200. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at 6,000. So these are six drivers that we all talked about. These are six drivers that have logged a lot of laps combined at Iowa. I think that this is a lineup that I honestly feel pretty good about. Obviously, there are some caveats to that. Like you're talking about Eric Jones, who's not finished in the top 19 or not top 18 over his last six races. You're talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who's had a very inconsistent season. And you could say the same about Chastain even, but I just feel really good about where all those guys are at in terms of, having a leg up on the competition at Iowa. You're talking about a three-time race winner there in Ricky Stenhouse. You're talking about a hot Michael McDowell, who's had some laps here as well. Eric Jones, a three-time race winner here. And then how can you go wrong with Seabell and Kyle Larson? So the longer I look at this lineup, honestly, the better I feel about it.
Yeah, so on paper, this lineup looks incredible. I mean, you got two three-time winners. You got a two-time winner in Christopher Bell, who's riding a three-race top 10 streak. Got the win also in that span. You got last week's runner-up in Michael McDowell. So, there's obviously question marks with Stenhouse and Eric Jones, but I think having that prior seat time and experience is going to pay off in a big way, as you could tell this entire episode. But also, just having those two aces in Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, I think is going to be so crucial. And someone like Ross Chastain, who I feel really, really good about. Because, first off, those two drivers did the tire test. I think that's going to be a huge, huge thing. Even factoring out the experience from the past, having this current, recent experience with that test is going to be pivotal. And I'd be very surprised, going in, if one of those two drivers didn't win and or lead the most laps. So, I love your lineup, definitely more than mine. But how I went about mine was that I could not leave Brad Keselowski out of my lineup. I feel really good about him this week. I think he has one of the best stats at that track at Iowa, albeit in a much different configuration and whatnot. But I had him in there. I also had Michael McDowell, Ross Chastain in common with you, two drivers I feel good about. But I sacrificed Stenhouse for Austin Dillon at $6,200, which is actually an upgrade by $200. So I went with him as someone who's very similar to Stenhouse in many aspects, but I just like the equipment he's in more so than Stenhouse. So, obviously, Austin Dillon hasn't done great collectively in the next gen, and honestly, really as a whole since making in the Cup Series, but I think that we've seen Kyle Busch have quality runs here. He's had a lot of speed. He's had top 10 speed. Austin Dillon had a top 10 2 weeks ago at Gateway, so I think there's a little bit of positive momentum. Didn't have a good day at Sonoma, but he hasn't really been the best in road courses, so I won't take a whole lot of stock into that. So, you're splitting hairs at that point. I think Stenhouse has the upper hand stats-wise, but I think equipment-wise, and even this season, Austin Dillon has been a tick better than him. So I did that, and then I also went with Truex as my ace at $9,500. I feel great about him this week. I mentioned him briefly during the favorites analysis. He's somebody that has 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s on short tracks. And the only reason he wasn't mentioned was, again, because that 4-race stretch right now where he's got finishes outside the top 10. but he's someone that needs a win. I think he could definitely get it at Iowa, even without any experience here. As well as Reddick. Reddick's somebody that does have experience at Iowa, and he's someone who's been really good in the short tracks this year as well. I believe it was 3 top 10s, 2 top 5s, had 5 starts, and he's been really good as of late. Had the top 10 at Sonoma, and he's just had a lot of speed in general. So I do feel good about this lineup, but I think I like yours more, just speaking on the optimism I have in drivers like Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell as your aces, Ross Chastain, who I included in mine, and then 2 guys who were 3-time winners in Stenhouse and Eric Jones. So good job by both of us, but I definitely lean towards yours as far as DFS goes.
A lot of unknowns this week, Cole, but it's time for us to take it to the bank, put our money where our mouth is, and make a couple of race winner and sleeper picks here. I missed last week's episode, so I think it was your turn to pick anyway first, but as we take turns every week, why don't you kick us off? Give me your race winner, and then I'll get first pick at sleeper this week.
Cool. For this week, I feel really good about Christopher Bell. I think having that tire test experience on top of the prior 8 starts and 2 wins he has at Iowa, it's going to factor in big to how he runs in this race. So I'm going to go with Seabell as the obvious pick for race winner this weekend.
I like that. I was going to go with Toyota one way or another because, like you mentioned, they've just been so good on the short tracks this year and really the whole next-gen era. So I'll take the other low-hanging fruit. I'm going to go with Denny Hamlin. I know he hasn't logged any laps at this track, but I don't think it's going to matter. I think between him and Seabell, those are 2 of my favorite picks of the week. I think Denny's been one of the best drivers, obviously, all year. He's going to be intent on putting that poor finish behind him from Sonoma, which was completely out of his control. I think he is going to be in control from the very start of the weekend. I think he's going to, adapt quickly to this track. I think he's going to have great raw speed, and I think Denny Hamlin's going to win this Iowa Corn 350. And as far as the sleeper goes, I'm going to go with it's hard not to pick one of those 3-time race winners that is outside the top 15 in Vegas' odds. And one of the best values of the week, I'll take Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at, again, he's way down there in the odds. I think Ricky, he's plus 25,000 for the race win. He's plus 900 for a top 10. I just think that there's too much talent behind the wheel of that car and too much experience behind the wheel of that car for him to not put up a top 10 this week.
Yeah, I feel good about Stenhouse as well. And truthfully, outside of Bell, Hamlin would have been my other pick to win. So we're on the same page there. For me, I mentioned it with my personal DFS composition. I picked Austin Dillon over Stenhouse, mainly for construction reasons and salary reasons, but I do feel good about him this week. So I'm going to go with another former winner at Iowa, somebody who has a lot of laps logged here. Second most all-time led there between both Xfinity and Truck Series in Austin Dillon. He's plus 25,000 for the race win, so right in line there with Stenhouse pretty much. And obviously, Austin Dillon's not been good this year. He hasn't been good for a while in the Cup Series, but I think just having that experience at Iowa, and I also think that we've seen quality runs with Kyle Busch. I know he's a completely different caliber driver, but it's nonetheless the same equipment. He's had top 10 speed the last 4 weeks or so. So I think that is something that you can take into account, as well as the experience in seat time. So give me Austin Dillon for a sleeper and give me Christopher Bell for my favorite this week.
Well, one thing is for sure. I mean, I feel pretty good about everything we've discussed today, but my eyes, and I'm sure your eyes and anyone listening, are going to be glued to practice and qualifying, and also just looking down the numbers of who's logging what laps, average top 10 averages, top 15 lap averages. I think that this is going to be a very important week of preparation, but ahead of the cars hitting the track, I think this was a really good head start. So I feel good about it, Cole. It is one of the best names to any race, the Iowa Corn 350 this week. It's going to be Saturday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time at Iowa. This will be a fun one. I'm excited. I just like anytime that there's a little bit of an unknown or not a lot that we know going in, it's a good kind of litmus test for our knowledge and our analysis, kind of the things that we rely on based on other short tracks, logging laps at Iowa in the Xfinity and Truck Series. I think that, it's fun. It's fun to see where our instincts and analysis stack up in a race weekend where there's less to go off of.
Yeah, I think that more than anything makes it a very exciting weekend. Also, just going to a new market or a newer market compared to where the Cup Series has been in the past is pretty interesting. As you know, our grandfather Lee is from Newton, Iowa, so he'll be here on Sunday to watch the race. So that'd be kind of fun to hear his stories from back then, and also help him better understand NASCAR more, because he's been watching more since I started covering the sport. So to kind of see him watch this race from somewhere he grew up will be pretty cool. But interesting market nonetheless. I think it's weird, but in the past, I remember watching these races at Iowa in the Nationwide Series, and they were so fun to watch. Like, this track used to be so worn out. It was multi-grooved, so I think the repave is going to be interesting. I got kind of discouraged hearing Christopher Bell's comments on the paved turns and whatnot, but I still think I have some optimism for this weekend. I think anytime we go to a short track, there's always some excitement, just given the potential for tempers to flare and whatnot. And we have seen some really good races in the past year at Iowa. If you want to do memories, I'll bring one up right now. Just because we started watching NASCAR pretty much when they started going to Iowa, and I remember very vividly one of the first races I ever watched in the Nationwide Series. It was Brad Keselowski's win in the number 88 GoDaddy car at Iowa, the inaugural race there. And it's also kind of funny because I was going through some clothes. My mom was making a quilt with all old shirts, and I came across one of that inaugural win shirt. So a race win tee from that Iowa race, Brad Keselowski in that number 88 neon green GoDaddy car. So that's one that stuck with me. Do you have anything that sticks out to you about Iowa? Because there's been some pretty insane finishes in the past there.
That's a great memory. There's one that comes to mind immediately, only because it popped up on my feed. I want to say to NASCAR and the NASCAR and NBC account, NASCAR and Fox account, they do a great job of resurfacing some of these memories, because this is something I don't know that I would have thought of off the top of my head if I didn't see it on my Instagram feed a couple days ago. It was one of Ricky Stenhouse's 3 Xfinity Series wins where something happened to his car. I think a tire went down coming out of the final turn or something. I think it was Carl Edwards just rammed into the back of him, and they both just demolished their cars coming across the front stretch. And when I think of Iowa, that's what I think of, is these fun finishes. And I know that was one that was kind of a freak accident, but it was one that as soon as I watched it, I remembered it instantly and remembered watching it live. And I think that's the kind of thing that there's potential for, is there's definitely some excitement anytime you go to a short track. I know they haven't been the best in this next-gen package, but you just named a great memory. I think that's a great memory I just brought up too, and I think that it's cool to be going to new tracks where the next generation of fans are going to be coming up with new memories of their own here at Iowa, and it's going to be fun to see the inaugural race in the Cup Series here. This has been a great edition of the Money Stop, Cole, going off of what we can for Iowa. Very intrigued to see how it plays out, but this has been great. Your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day is going to drop the jack, as any great pit stop does. So for Cole, I'm Steven. Hope you're telling us this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff on wherever you're listening from. And for Cole, once again, Steven, signing off. This has been the Money Stop. Gotta make 'em wanna come back for more.